Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
I'm Sophie Jaffe. And I'm Noah Jaffe.
Woohoo! Noah is
In the
2 weeks
house.
old.
Yep.
She's here representing, and she can speak.
Yep.
So gifted right off the bat.
Avi.
Noah's just hanging out here. Maybe we'll put a little picture of Noah in addition. I think this is the first episode we're doing, and it's coming out that we recorded after Noah was born.
Yeah.
Whatever. If you could follow that logic, then you're one of our people. Sophie is a trooper. I got to tell you, I recorded the interview you're about to hear without Sophie.
I was in bed.
She's resting a little bit.
No, let's just call it. Okay, so I've had an ear infection for 2 weeks, and it's a middle ear infection in case you don't follow me on Insta.
Which you should.
And it's been torturous. It was awful. The birth was terrible because of my ear. It's so crazy. So then I was on antibiotics for the first 9 days of Noah's life. And it's still not better. I still can't hear out of my right ear. So I've seen an ear, nose, and throat specialist. He's the one that switched my antibiotics, gave me a shot of antibiotics. Now I'm going to a different person on Friday and just hoping we can get to the bottom of this because I miss being able to hear and not feel like I'm underwater. And then yesterday I got an infection in my breast with basically a clogged milk duct. Yeah. So I had a fever as if it's not like hard enough to like nurse a newborn basically on demand and be completely exhausted. Then I got an infection and I had a fever and I was shaking and so cold and freezing. And it's just been a really challenging couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Therefore, I did not participate in Melissa's.
So I really stepped in and really gave it my all by doing an interview alone.
Thank you for that.
But we wanted to bring you this intro because, first of all, Melissa Hartwig, who's the person we interviewed today, is the originator, the force, the founder of Whole30 and that whole movement and the millions and millions of people who follow that by now and have done incredibly well and changed their bodies and all that wonderful stuff. And so we were really happy to have her on board. We met her through the whole Mind Body Green crew and all those people and Jason and that.
She's lovely. I wish I could have been here for that, but I was definitely on my deathbed.
Yeah. And I mean, I knew this before because when we first met Melissa, a lot of what we talked about was our past. And, my past involves drug addiction. So does hers. But man, do we go deep in this episode.
I can't wait to listen to it.
We talked about a lot of really, really cool, long, deep factors that not only brought out Whole30 and created that whole movement for her, but allowed her to become this motivational, enlightening person now from the depths. And those are, you know me, but like those are my favorite stories, or the people that we get on who we connect with because they're doing incredible things, which is true of everybody we've had on. And then you find out that this entire backstory of struggle and suffering and pain that led them to this new stage in their life. And it's always so inspiring, right? The whole hero journey movement and all that. Todd, our friend T-Mac, came up in the conversation as well because, for Melissa, it started out with sexual trauma. And we've talked about that before. We've talked about some of your experiences around this. But, I feel like if there's one thing I love talking about on Ignited is giving people hope through the stories of others.
Yeah. What did you talk about with Todd?
So Todd gave her this really cool, we're going to have a link to it, but a really cool meditation that she does after exercise. And she said it's completely transformed the way that she moves forward.
He's such a sweetheart. We need to have him on.
Yeah, he really, really is.
I love him.
And it's also the cool thing of kind of bringing together and calling from all these different people that you know in your life, the tools that end up creating
absolutely
your self-care, your toolkit, the thing that
and
allows you.
Your support system, the people you trust, and where you go when you're feeling a little off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for Melissa, it wasn't a little off. And I think, you know, in the context of everything that you and I have talked about, this theme just keeps coming up for me over and over and over. And that is, whether it's about our relationship, you know, somebody shared, did you see that on Instagram today? Somebody shared that, please record a fight because, you know, we'd love to hear it. What I like about what we do is that we don't pretend that everything is perfect all the time.
Right.
And I think that's why people tune in. That's why they like it. But in the same way, for a lot of our friends, like there are people, some of the people we know are so uber successful and so well known for the amazing things they've done. People start idolizing, forgetting, imagining that the backstory is also nice and clean and perfect. And for so many of us, I mean, I can't speak for other people listening right now, but for me, I need to know and I need to remember that everybody has their struggles all along the way. And what I'm seeing right now is the end result of everything they've dealt with and not how they dealt with it or the process they went through and all that.
Yeah. So important to share all of that so that you fully know your process and you can show up more authentically to your life. And then also you can inspire others who are going through something.
Yeah. I mean, even right now, the way you opened up today, you know, really talking about the real struggles of postnatal birth. I mean, you willed Noah to life, right? Like if we talk about manifestation and really being as clear about what it is you want and getting it, you got it. But the road it wasn't perfect to get here. And
it was a gnarly pregnancy. Like there wasn't a moment where I was like, oh, this is an easy pregnancy. Like it was really, really rough. And I'm willing to pay that price because I wanted her, but I'm never the type of person to just pretend.
Yeah. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think
some people like that and some people don't. And it's just too much vulnerability for some people. And that's okay. I remember when I was 20, was it Yelena? We were in Amsterdam and I think we were like on mushrooms and it hadn't really kicked in yet, but we were kind of in that like fuzzy, fun, playful moment. And she told me that I'm just too intense.
Right.
And it killed me because I was like 19 and didn't know how to, you know, love myself in my wholeness. Instead, it was like the things that I wanted people to approve. And it sounded like she wasn't approving that part of me. And that's what makes me me. That's being intense and passionate about things is what makes me me. And I should never have to hide that or feel ashamed of that, you know?
Yeah. And you know, it's kind of funny because Elena is really intense.
She is herself, in her own way.
Yeah. So it's so funny that she would be the one to say that to you.
Well, we're all mirrors for each other too. Like, I mean, we see and we criticize the things that we don't like in ourselves, right?
In other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so, is this the night that we later ended up FaceTiming,
or whatever
or video
it was
chatting,
back then.
Skyping.
Yeah.
I think we Skyped when I was in Milan and you were in, I believe that was the night, right?
Yeah.
And you were running around like half naked on mushrooms
we had
in a hotel.
like little bathing suits on and we were like painting each other. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty dope. Not going to lie.
You gotta love being 19.
Yeah.
Right? And
just
20.
so free.
Yeah, totally. But that's the power. You know, it's funny. I mean, we didn't mention a single thing about what Whole30 is in this episode.
Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah.
She didn't share a single thing about what the parameters of Whole30 are.
I do that when I'm interviewed too. And then I'm like, oh, should I mention anything about philosophy?
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But I really feel like at the end of this interview, people want to run out and do Whole30 because what she uncovers, and it's true for you, it's true for me, that's why we started Ignited, is we started this because what we're doing worked for us. And we wanted to tell more people about what worked for us so that they can try for themselves if they're desperate. I mean, I just saw a couple today who found out about us from the podcast, or she found out about it from the podcast. They started listening together, and then they came in for a session because they like the concept, but then they wanted some guidance on how to really maximize it, which reminds me that we have the couples workshop, and we'll link to again, so that people, when they want that and can't afford to come here or voice chat and spend hundreds of dollars on a session, can get some of these tools.
Absolutely.
Really to be able to apply them in their own life. But that's why when you're really passionate about something, that's why you do it, is because it worked for you. You've seen evidence of its success, and then you evangelize it and you want to do more of it. And so I feel like the conversation we had with her was about how she decided, I'm going to change who I am. I'm going to change my life. And part of that was through nutrition. She was already involved in exercise. And the exact same thing happened to you and I around coupleship. And we needed to change who we believed we had to be in a couple so that the coupleship could survive and thrive.
Exactly.
And I think that takes me to our relationship tip of the day. And that was that facing your demons head on is actually what makes you stronger. And what made me write that when I was thinking about it is I feel like a lot of people try to hide or change that about themselves first.
Totally. That's what we were talking about earlier. It's just, we hide the parts of ourselves that we're not proud of. We hide the parts that we, don't want other people to see or feel, but then we're not being truly intimate. We're not being truly honest. We're not being authentic. And then it makes it even harder to be close to someone.
Yeah.
And to be your true self.
And if you try to push it down and it's big enough,
it'll create bigger problems.
Yeah. You end up having to compensate somehow. And so that's when you start over drinking at the dinner table because there's so much inside of you that you can't let out. So you try to numb it and make it go away. And next thing you know, and this I write about this in this book because it's coming out. Next thing you know, you and your partner are having fights about the fact that you're drinking too much. It's not about the fucking drinking too much. It's about the fact that you haven't been able to tell them, our guest for next week, they haven't had an orgasm in 6 months. And you don't know how to tell them that because you've been faking it and
you're ashamed.
You don't know how to have the conversation because you're ashamed and you think it's going to break you up. So you're drinking over it. And the next thing you know, you guys have a fight about whether you're an alcoholic or not.
Exactly.
And so this is tough though. I mean, again, I'm thinking of this couple that I sat with here today. Really easy to say. But for many of you listening right now, the demons run deep. There are things that you've been hiding for maybe for 15, 20 years. And so sometimes the work is first internal on how can I even uncover and accept those, I'm calling them demons because everybody can relate to them, but the pieces about myself that I don't love, so that I can then have the conversation with my partner or the other people important in my life.
Absolutely.
You had that conversation with Elena about being intense, or is that what it was, intense?
Yeah.
Is there a part to yourself, a quote unquote demon, a skeleton that you feel like you've dealt with in the last 5, 10, 15 years of your life that's improved your life overall?
Ask that again.
Is there something that's like a dark secret or something that you held on to before that you were shying away from or running away from, and then you ended up dealing with it in a different way head on, and it's improved your life?
I think everything. I think like when you're a teenager, you hide from anything that is real. At least I did. I didn't want anyone to think that I wasn't perfect, including myself. And everyone had on a mask in high school. Everyone kind of walked around not fully showing up as who they authentically are. So I think I had to retrain myself in all ways, from like relationship stuff to sex stuff to, everything. The more I started talking about what's really happening, the more I felt like I was healing and more whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know obviously I talked to people in your life who were around you during kind of your long relationship when there was abuse, and most people didn't know, like one or two friends knew.
Yeah.
That
I definitely hid the gravity of the craziness with my ex to myself too. It was like, if you read my journals from then, I don't talk about it at all.
Interesting.
I'll talk about how he's crazy, but I won't actually, I was in complete denial about it.
Yeah.
and just so ashamed that I would allow someone to treat me that way. So I just had this facade, this pretend, side to myself.
Yeah. And
it's so much harder.
Yeah, obviously you and I have dealt with a lot of my things over time, and one of them was this something I didn't even know was I would have needed to work on, but with this whole idea of learning about sex and learning about what I'm expected to be like as a man from porn and that kind of media when I was younger, and never really feeling comfortable in it, never feeling like that's what I wanted to be, but still feeling like that was a standard I had to measure myself up to, which always made me feel like I was failing because that was never my standard, and caused a lot of issues, and then eventually caused issues in our relationship because I never dealt with it.
It always adds up.
Yeah.
It has to go somewhere.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's for sure a lot of the alcohol and drug use was because I didn't act around women the way I thought men were supposed to act around women based on what I was seeing. And so I needed some courage, something else to make that okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah. Thanks for being here for the resolution.
Yeah. Party.
Yeah. Cool. So we're going to take a miniature little break. I just wanted to remind you, we talked about the relationship workshop. That is live. We'll have a link for it. There's also the Ignited Recovery Hero Program for those of you who are or know somebody who's struggling with addiction problems, etc. Totally anonymous, totally a way where you can deal with this from home and not have on your own schedule and not have to go somewhere, spend tens of thousands of dollars and all that kind of stuff.
So great.
Especially in the context of the conversation with Melissa, really, really powerful stuff. Wait to get to the other side and listen to this incredible interview with Melissa Hartwig from Whole30.
Stay tuned.
Bye.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. We are back for the interview portion of our Ignited podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm going to be doing this interview solo. You all know that Sophie just delivered our little baby girl, Noah Yael. And so she's weirdly tired. I can't fathom that being a thing, but I also didn't have to deliver a baby and I'm not breastfeeding right now. So I'm going to let her rest. And it gives me a really great opportunity to check in with our guest today. We've got Melissa Hartwig today from Whole30, but when I met you, Melissa, I didn't meet you as part of Whole30. I met you at Revitalize from Mind Body Green, and we got into these really deep conversations, as always happen there in the desert. But I thought maybe you can intro yourself to our listeners in whatever way feels natural to you.
Oh, I like that. I don't think I've ever done that on a podcast before. I love it. So I am the co-creator of the Whole30 program and the author of 6, soon to be 7 books about the Whole30. Wow. So that's kind of my day job. I've been running the Whole30. It's been around since 2009. But on top of talking about Whole30 and people's health and habits and relationship with food, I really like talking about tangential well-being and health topics. So I'm a speaker about things like, self-love and entrepreneuring and finding balance and what that means in today's busy modern world. I talk a lot about addiction and recovery because I'm a recovering drug addict. So the recovery population is very near to my heart.
Yeah.
I'm talking about how, people's relationship with food impacts every area of their life. I talk a little bit about making it work myself as a single mom and an entrepreneur, trying to find the balance between sleep and exercise and family and friends and all of that stuff. So I think that's a good, really long-winded intro.
No, not long-winded at all. And perfect, because I didn't really want to, Ignited, the podcast and the company in general is all about relationships. And I didn't want to limit this conversation to Whole30. I mean, I know it's a huge thing for you, but if I remember from our conversations before, even the way that came about was because of your own personal experience. It came about because of your own struggles, your own really seeking of what was going to heal me, what was going to make a better life for me. And you already mentioned so many of the points, so I'll kind of touch on them, but then I'd love to go through them. I know, again, we share pretty similar stories in terms of our past, at least. And then this idea that you can go really far down and be really miserable and look for a way out, relatively hopeless, and end up in a situation that you're in right now, which is this leader of a wellness movement. And what I love about that is, I mean, once we talk about the story, it becomes pretty clear that was not obvious 20 years ago. 20 years ago that you were going to end up here they were not this, part of the same story. So no. Can you walk me through that? I mean, I know you mentioned addiction, that's part of my story as well. I'm thinking we're going to end up with how Whole30 even came about, but do you mind? Let's walk through that story a little bit.
Yeah. I was a pretty well-behaved, good, studious kid, got, straight A's. My parents were still married. My mom stayed home with us and worked. I had a very typical, middle-class childhood. But at 16, I experienced some sexual abuse at 16 at the hands of someone who was very close to me, a caregiver. And I didn't know how to process that. And my family was very big and Catholic and of the mindset that if you just didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. And I really struggled with that incident and kind of how to handle it, and kept looking for ways to take myself out of it. And I tried drinking alcohol in high school and that didn't work. I tried, restricting my eating, and that never suited the need or filled the hole. And when I found drugs my senior year of high school, that was it. I had found what I was looking for to sort of escape from what I had been going through. And that kind of sent me off and running on about a 5-year period of pretty serious drug addiction. I did go to college. I was functional for a long time, but I ended up having to drop out of school. I went to rehab. I got clean for a year. I went back to using for a little while. I mean, it's not ever a linear path.
Yeah.
But when I got out of rehab the second time, I knew intuitively that I had to change everything about my life in order to stay clean. And that was really all I wanted in my whole life, was just to stay clean. That was my only goal. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started exercising and paying attention to what I ate. I changed the music I listened to. I changed the places I hung out. I changed my friends, certainly. I got rid of some clothes. I really adopted this idea of a growth mindset, that I was now a healthy person with healthy habits. And that's kind of where the exercise and nutrition stuff started to play in. Fast forward to 2009, and the Whole30 was just really a 30-day self-experiment designed to help me figure out if I could improve my training and recovery. Let's eat squeaky clean for 30 days and kind of adopt a paleo kind of mindset and see what would happen. And instead, in that experience, I was able to identify all the ways that I was now using food the way I used to use drugs, which was such an eye-opening experience for me. I had no idea that food had replaced that in terms of punishment and reward and to self-soothe, show control. Yes. Yeah. And it was such a powerful, transformative experience that I decided to share it on my training blog. And that was really the birth of the Whole30.
So cool. So cool. And what I love about it is so many of the pieces that you're talking about are, completely aligned with the way that I work with people facing addiction anyway, and mirror my story, right? So this idea of I'm going to experiment and work on being a different kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who that person is yet. I don't know what will work, but I'm going to keep practicing. You talked about mindset, and that's a huge piece of it. I'm going to keep practicing what it would feel like to be otherwise. I mean, I know when I got out of jail, I remember I told myself, I'm going to do whatever it takes not to get back in that place. And I didn't know what that meant. I was just writing this in an article yesterday. I didn't know if that meant cleaning floors or washing dishes or, folding clothes at a store in the mall. I had no idea what it meant, but it was about this really clear mindset that had to do with, I'm just going to keep forging ahead, and I'm going to do what I need to do to move forward. So, oh God, so many pieces here to touch on. First of all, the fact that this started with trauma for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've only spoken of that like once or twice publicly, but I'm starting to talk about it more because it's an integral part. What's that?
So common.
Well, it's super common. It is so debilitating. And especially like that was my first sexual experience, and the imprint that leaves on you. I mean, we are talking like decades of therapy for me to get to the place where I've processed it. I've accepted it. I've forgiven, like honestly forgiven, not just said I've forgiven, like in my heart, I've forgiven. I mean, it's so common. It's still very shameful. It's still the only, I think, crime in which the victim is very often placed on trial before they even hear the facts. I mean, it's so terrifying to come out and speak of it. So yeah. I felt like being willing and able to share a bit of my story, or start to, hopefully will, even if people aren't ready to find their voice, like I have a voice. So can I speak for those who can't right now?
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about it pretty clearly, obviously, here about how that was a real fork in the road for you. Like life was not going the way that it ended up going before this event happened. And I think that's what a lot of people forget is they've gone through trauma and then their life falls off the deep end. And 6, 7, 8 years later, they start identifying as this damaged person who's never been okay and has been, if I can just be blunt, has been fucked up their whole life, etc.
Yep.
But they're discounting the impact, the power, the force of having something like that happen to you.
Yes. It took me years to arrive at the idea that I'm not actually broken. I can't tell you the number of years I spent describing myself as broken, like up until relatively recently. And I think in my head, I thought this happened, I was 16. I'm in my 40s now, like get over it. And I think people want you to get over it because they don't know how to deal with it or process. Like my family did the best they could, but how do you handle something like that when, it was a family member and then it's your daughter and like,
yeah.
It's so complicated and difficult and shameful. And like, it's one of the most difficult things I think to process.
Yeah. And I can't fathom because I've never gone through it myself. I've had, the mini traumas that I had don't compare to that, but I hear that from, I would say almost every single female client I've ever worked with has had something like this happen to her. And you're right. There's such a taken on of the responsibility for it having happened. And you're at 16. I mean, some girls as young as 8 or 9 years old are taking on responsibilities if they did something in it, but then it changes your world perception. I mean, in a really obvious way, right? If somebody I'm supposed to trust and is supposed to take care of me does that to me,
yes.
How can I trust anybody ever again? Yes.
It has impacted every romantic relationship I've ever had. It's impacted relationships I have with family, with friends. I mean, there's nothing that this incident hasn't shifted.
Yeah.
In the rest of my life. It was so incredibly powerful. And until I acknowledged how powerful it was, I wasn't able to process it.
So that gets me to the other piece, which is so important. I mean, I wrote down right after it, shame, right? So one of the main things that happens around, especially this sort of trauma, but almost any of these sort of experiences that get us to a way of life that is just not aligned with the the way we saw ourselves going, right? Nobody says to themselves, and I don't know what the drug of choice was. I don't know if you mind sharing it, but was it? Cocaine or?
I was like an equal opportunity user. I oddly did not have a drug of choice. I did just like all of it. Yeah. I was
like a kitchen sink user.
I only dated drug dealers for like 5 years. So I had access to basically everything. And I couldn't get messed up enough. I couldn't be like under enough during that time.
Because then what I talk about is shame is this debilitating feeling. It's, I call it kind of the most basic escape ridden feeling. You know, you will do anything to not feel real shame. Yeah. And so completely annihilating your brain to the point where you are unconscious seems like a good option. And this is where I actually hate the shame and stigma that follows addicts, is because people keep behaving over and over and over. We can call it a disease, we can call it whatever we want, but they keep behaving over and over as if addicts are making this active choice. And the only active choice addicts are making is to not live their own life, is to not live in their own brain, because it's so painful.
Yeah.
And when we make them feel bad about it for those choices, we keep driving them farther and farther underground, in the sense that I am not okay as a human being. And I feel like until you talked about it, until you get to the point where you can acknowledge I'm damaged or I'm hurt or I'm in pain, until you can acknowledge that, it's going to be hard to get out.
Yes. I remember doing this exercise in therapy at one point where you just sort of try to disconnect your story about what happened from what actually happened. And that was an incredibly powerful experience, because my story was all about how I played a role in it. I, kind of conspired. I was 16. I was old enough to know better. And then I handled it so poorly. And then I became a drug addict, which only reinforced my, I'm worthless and I'm broken mentality. And until I was able to separate what happened to me from who I am, right? Like, I was a drug addict. I identify as a drug addict because I feel like that's an important part of my recovery. But that doesn't mean that I'm not a good person, a worthy person, worthy of love from others and self-love. And until I was able to separate that out, I really couldn't make a lot of progress in therapy. Yeah.
And so the difference between feeling badly about an event or an occurrence and feeling badly about who you are as a human, those are huge differences. And whether I work with couples or individuals, and obviously I recognize it in my own story and a lot of my friends, it's when you feel bad about who you are as a human, it's really difficult to take positive action and get to that mindset piece that you were talking about, which is I'm going to practice a different way of being. And that's big. So I'm really, I love hearing, I know this is difficult stuff to talk about, but I love hearing these in conversations, because there are people obviously who look up to you from the whole 30 wellness community and work that you do, who are experiencing these sorts of things and have experienced these sorts of things. That's maybe even how they got to not being well, whether that's drugs, alcohol, controlling their food, cutting. I mean, there are dozens of ways that people deal with this stuff. And so it's so beautiful to see that at some point you turn the corner and you start saying, okay, I am going to be in control of this thing. I need to understand what it is. And it sounds like that included therapy for you, a lot of therapy.
So much.
And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that and what was powerful about those experiences for you. And then you talked about this after you got out of second rehab. So I'm the same. I have the same story. I went into one rehab, relapsed, essentially kind of ended up homeless. Like, I had a car, but I could sleep in my car or sleep on friends' couches. That's where I got evicted from my apartment. So that's when it dropped for me, was, oh shit. Like, I just got myself booted out of the only place I have to live by lying to people about my own drug use. This is serious. I need to do something about this. And so what allowed that shift? Because I'm imagining the story was still a little bit the same when you're in that second rehab of, I'm a loser, drug addict who's going to be a no good. Do you know what created that mindset shift for you?
I think when I went to rehab the first time, I was in a very perilous position. I had been cutting, I had been isolating, I was having panic attacks, like the wheels were falling off my bus. And I had a boyfriend at the time that I was living with, bless his heart. He is still one of my favorite ex-boyfriends because he was the one who said, I'm either taking you to rehab tonight or like, I'm leaving because I can't watch you do this. And it was literally by the grace of God that I said, like, make the call.
Wow.
When I stayed clean for a year, I went back to it. I don't remember what happened. It like happened so quickly. And I dropped back in exactly where I left off. There was no grace period. There was no ramp up. And that scared the shit out of me. I realized that like I didn't have a lot of grace back when I went to rehab the first time. And if I was going to drop in now this hard and this fast, I was basically going to end up like dead.
Yeah.
And I think it just scared me enough that I was able to snap myself out of it, make the call, go back into an outpatient, and realize at that point that like I had to get very serious about it, and that there was no such thing as getting too serious about how much I was going to make this recovery my priority.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, I'd love to dig in because for me, these moments, so you're out of rehab for a year and you had tools. I mean, each person has their program and there's requirements around that program. So I don't want to call out anything in specific, but like, I'm assuming you were doing what you were told to do in that rehab for a year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you were completely sober for that year.
Completely.
Do you remember what happened that made you pick up the first time?
I remember a small bathroom and a mirror and a counter. And I remember looking up from the counter into the mirror with something dripping down the back of my throat. I don't even know what I took.
Okay.
It was like, it happened so fast. And I think it was this combination. This is going to sound familiar. It's been a year. I'm so much better now. It's totally different. You romanticize all of the good stuff. All the bad shit that happened when you were using kind of fades away. And I think I just got really lax.
Yeah, interesting.
In my recovery.
So let me ask you a question, because I think that we've talked about this for sure, so I don't think this comes as a shock, but this is where my approach to recovery differs a little bit. And because I had the same, I relapsed. And I know that partially I relapsed because I hadn't worked on those habits. There's nothing that I'd done to learn how to be different. Mm-hmm. I learned how to not use.
Yes.
But that didn't make me a different person. I was the same exact person, just not using. And that was tough to live with. I didn't like myself. I had fucked up and had ruined enough relationships and had been such an asshole to my parents and done so many bad things to people around me that I felt terrible about myself. And I still felt terrible about myself. I was just sober through it. It's actually not until I've been off of meth for 15 years, but it's only the last 7 to 8 years, the work I did with Sophie on our coupleship, that unraveled that deep shame for me. But I'm wondering, and again, you don't know what happened, and so it's really interesting, but to me, it's like, until we deal with that, the underlying shame and who we are at the core, it's going to be hard to feel good about ourselves. So we can hold on and we can do that white knuckling thing where we're just kind of, I'm going to make it through today and just get to sleep so that you can wake up the next day and white knuckle it again because you hate life. Or we can it's harder work initially, but it pays off so much more later to go, why don't I like myself? What is it? But I think there has to be an acceptance that there's a situation somewhere down the line where there's the potential to love yourself again, right? And I don't know that I believed that in the middle of it. Like when I was a drug dealer, I just thought I was going to spend the rest of my life as an asshole. Like that's where I believed that I was. So for you hit this point, you saw yourself in the mirror, you caught and went, oh no, I'm right back where before. And then you committed the second time. So it wasn't a boyfriend saying, you got to handle this. And you saying, okay, you said, I got to do something about this.
Yeah. I don't think I could have described it any better than what you just described. I spent the first year not using, but that was the only thing I was doing. I was doing my therapy. I was going to meetings when I had to. I was like putting the check marks on the boxes, but I was not taking an active role. And as I've said a number of times, like you choose your hard. What I chose to do after I got clean the second time, digging into therapy, unpacking all of that shit in the most painful, uncomfortable way, making all of these changes, creating buffers, reestablishing relationships, making my amends, that was hard. But it was no harder than me white knuckling every single day for a year, still hating myself and feeling like I was broken at the core.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message for people to hear. It's not easy. It is painful. Look, it's as painful as the work you're doing to run away from it, right?
Yep.
Look at how hard you're working to escape, and that will give you a clue as to how hard it's going to be to unpack what's going on inside.
Yeah.
But that's okay, right? I think that's what's important about sharing these stories is when you're done with that, though, it's over. Like, I don't worry. I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't worry about my addiction coming back. Mm. I do the work every day to be a different person. And that's what I tell my people in the Ignited courses. I say, your job is not to stop using. Your job is to become the sort of person that doesn't use the way you're using right now. That's your job.
Yes.
If you can do that, you can't even recognize your life. I mean, you end up look at where you are right now. And you went from somebody who thinks they're not worth putting all the work into and being proud of to somebody who helps. I don't even know how many people have gone through Whole30 now that you know.
Millions.
Yeah. To have changed millions of other people's lives for the better. Mm-hmm. And that's what we get when we do the work.
It is. I wish that I could give someone an inkling, because once I started digging into it and doing it, I thought, why didn't I do this years ago? Yeah. Because it was hard and it was uncomfortable, but it was not harder than what I had been doing to try to escape. And I wish I could, if there's one piece of advice I could give someone who's struggling right now and who has been just running and escaping and hiding and isolating in shame, what you are doing now is so much harder. It is so much more effortful. It hurts so much more than being brave, taking that first step and opening the box. I wish if there's one thing I could tell my 16-year-old self, that would be it.
But I think that's what you're doing right now. And you said you're speaking, and you're speaking about a lot of roles. I mean, holy crap. First of all, I didn't know how some of these, I knew you had a child. I didn't know you were raising your child by yourself. So there are so many boxes you're checking now in terms of, here are examples of how, yes, I've made this transition. I've changed my life. There are still challenges just because I addressed the underlying core issues that were my biggest struggles does not create a unicorn life where I wake up in the morning and the sun shines on me just the right way and everything works out in my life. And so it sounds like part of what you're doing right now is, I don't even know how you've written 7 books. I'm about to come up with my first one. It was my own little version of hell. But 7 books helping people walk through this wellness piece of it. My guess is you probably talk about the other, being busy, sleep and exercise, how to manage, how to juggle all these things, parenthood. What do you find now is the thing that really helps you not just stay grounded, because that's nice, but be able to show up in the way that you're showing up to everything right now? What allows that to happen?
If I could only answer that with one thing, it's the most important thing. It is this concept of paying myself first. I take care of myself first, because unless I am centered and grounded and calm and energetic and happy and productive, I am of no good to anyone in my life, including my son. And so that's not to say that, my kid needs me and I'm sorry, mom's meditating. It's just to say that when I think about big picture, how I plan my day, how I structure my life, how I think about my work-life balance, there are days where I'm just not on social media at all because I do not have capacity to give to you today, because I need to give back to myself. Yeah. And there are times where instead of scrolling or answering emails, I am taking time for myself. I'm saying no to obligations that kind of sound fun, but I know are going to stress me out. I'm occasionally telling friends who want to hike together, you know what, man, I need this church for myself today. I'm going to hike by myself. I'm paying myself first, because when I am full, I have so much to give to everyone else.
That's so great.
And I think that's been the most important thing I've learned over the last few years is that, as an entrepreneur, you're almost conditioned that you have to give everything away. You have to give every single aspect of yourself and run yourself into the ground to be successful. And that is total bullshit.
Wow. I love that. I mean, look, the whole myth of entrepreneurship is that you work 120-hour weeks and all that kind of stuff. And no doubt my business is on my brain probably all the time, but I love what you're saying, that you kind of have to steal time for yourself. You have to make a decision to do it. Can I ask you a question? Because it's something I actually struggle with all the time. Do you still feel guilty while you're doing it a little bit?
Never.
Oh, I still feel guilty.
Never do I feel guilty. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. This is like it. I am doing the best thing I possibly can for my friends, my family, and my community when I take this time for myself.
Yeah.
There's no better way for me to spend it. And I feel like I've got a really good balance now. I know how much I can give. I know when I need to restore. I know there are periods of time where like, I know I'm not going to get a lot of time for myself. Like when I'm on book tour, and I prepare for that ahead of time, and I make plans for how I'm going to recover from it after the fact. Like I think I'm smart about it.
That's great. I heard, I saw Tony Robbins speak at an event once, and he was saying the same thing. Like after he schedules his self-care time after each one of his big events, because, they're like 3 to 4 days where he is working 10 to 12 hours a day, and giving everything that he has. But then after that, it's like phones are away, no email. I'm gone for a week and I'm recovering.
Yeah.
That's something I need to work on for sure. Sophie and I are both entrepreneurs, and that makes it really weird in the family sometimes, because your brain never really stops thinking about the stuff, because it's a passion. You don't put this kind of work into something unless you're really, really passionate about it.
Right.
But I love hearing that you figured out not only that you need the time, but how to take it without feeling guilty. Do you mind when did that hit? When did that click for you?
I've had so my morning routine, everybody knows that I do not take calls or work before 10 a.m. every day, ever, unless it's like some kind of emergency. I don't start work before 10. And my morning routine has been going on since I've had it in place since about 2006, I think.
Okay.
I get up, I spend time with my son. If I have him, if I don't have him, I go straight to the gym or straight to a hike, and I do my healthy movement and meditation before I start working. Every single day. You do not mess with the morning routine.
That's awesome.
And it's like, I'm fiercely protective of that, because if I can have that, then the rest of my day can go to hell in a handbasket. And I'm like, cool, I got my priorities done. Like I'm centered, I'm grounded. I've taken my time for me. So I tend to have a morning routine and a nighttime routine that are pretty bomb-proof.
That's awesome. And if we go back to what we were talking about before, knowing that you are worthy of asking for exactly what you need, and that if somebody's not willing to give it to you, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That means there's something weird about that relationship. And maybe you haven't explained how important this is for you, or that person doesn't really respect you.
Yes. Yes. Right. Listen, as an entrepreneur, it is up to us to set boundaries. People will take as much as you are willing to give. That is human nature, especially when you're in a position of leadership where you're helping people like what you do or what I do. So unless you're setting boundaries, they're going to continue to take and take and take and take, and they will again run you into the ground.
Yeah, I'm not great at boundaries. It's funny. I was just talking to my assistant before we got on this, where I have this thing, because I'm not as good about not getting right into my phone yet. I'm getting better at it, but there's one thing that happens quite a bit. I don't know if this happens to you at all, but online trolls show up more and more for me the more successful I am. And part of the reason is, I get it. What I do around recovery is different than the way a lot of other people look at it. So I would say people who are really dogmatic and closed-minded in their own recovery don't like what I do. And so inevitably every morning I get at least one, but typically 2 to 4 people who are saying that I'm robbing people or calling what I'm doing a scam or whatever it is, just talking shit. And I take it really to heart, because this is all I think about all day. And it's all I've thought about all day for probably about 10 years of how to do this better and how to provide help for people better. But I was just talking to her about it. I think I'm just going to delegate that part. Like, I'm not going to get on Facebook until 10. I think that's literally what I said. Until that stuff is cleaned out.
Yeah.
I don't wanna look at it. I don't want to care about it. It interrupts me from being able to do what I know I'm doing that is serving people. And it's distracting me. Yeah.
It's like you're some kind of masochist or something for forcing yourself to look at that every single morning. Like you don't have to. You can have someone clear that out. You can only look at it when you feel like you're capable and in a place of recognizing that their comment says nothing about you and everything about where they are in their own experience right now.
Yeah.
And that come from it from a place of compassion.
Yeah.
But there are a million different ways that you could handle that don't require you to ruin your day first thing in the morning voluntarily.
No, I love it. And I've heard, so many people that I follow and I think are incredible at what they do talk about this sacred time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty good about the movement stuff. I do my gratitude list. I do a little meditation and I move. I do some exercise typically before I start getting to work. But I'm going to follow your example after this and get a little stronger about it. So I know you just read the book.
Yes.
What's coming up in your world? What are some exciting things that Melissa's doing?
So the new book coming out in the fall is going to be a slow cooker instant pot cookbook. So that's something our community has been asking for ages. 150 recipes, all Whole30 that you like throw in a slow cooker or instant pot and let it do the work for you. So I'm excited about that. We've got a great team of recipe developers that we've been working with for about 3 years now who just kill. So that's really great. We started a Whole30 certified coaching program in August. We just enrolled our 100th coach about a month ago, but these are like boots on the ground, Whole30 experts in communities located all around the world, mostly in the US, but we've got like 7 or 8 international coaches now who are there to guide people through the Whole30, to provide motivation and accountability and support and resources to help them with things like grocery shopping and travel and family and feeding kids, like all of the practical application stuff that you would normally reach out for online. We want to have an expert in every community across the country. That's awesome. That's what we're kind of working towards now. Yeah, that in-person social support is so important for habit change and accountability and sustainability with new habits, right? So, and kind of as you know, through your addiction and recovery practices, like isolation is not the answer to making these kinds of difficult changes, because I think changing your diet is incredibly emotional and very challenging. You want to have that in-person social support. You want to have people who reinforce your growth mindset, who can, remind you that you're a healthy person with healthy habits, that you can actually connect with on an emotional level around some of these changes. So that's the point of the coaching program. I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, I love, there's something nice about being able to do remote and online work, because so much of the shame that we talked about here originally is easier to hide when you're doing the remote work. But what I have found, so I do live weekly chats with my people. Some people are only willing to chat by type. Some people are willing to speak with no audio, with no video, and some people are willing to do video. And you can kind of see as people progress and reduce their shame, they are willing to expose themselves more and more. And when you're done hiding completely, like when you have no reason to hide, you are a different person than you were when you started the process. So it'll be really cool to see what the people who align with your accountability coaches can achieve, because they're already at that stage where they're willing to say, hey, here I am, here are my struggles, help me out. They've left the fully hiding piece of the puzzle behind.
Yes, and there's so much benefit to that. Just in-person social connection. I think we feel like we're so connected because we are online so much and we're on social media and we're texting and we're whatever, but nothing takes the place of that physical interaction.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's funny. You're wearing a Heroes in Recovery shirt. We call our course participants Ignited Heroes. Cool. So another book. I mean, you're driving me crazy. I don't even understand.
Well, I have a lot of help with the cookbooks. I will say, like, I don't write a lot with the cookbooks. I have a team, so don't give me too much credit there.
Cool. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Then we've got 5 questions that we ask every single person that comes on. And so I'd like to move on. Our people love to hear the answers from our guests on these. The first question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Ooh. I mean, I honestly think that pay yourself first was pretty game changing for me. I know I already talked about it, but it was so simple and so succinct, and it just made so much sense. I think that was a giant game changer for me.
Do you remember who you heard that from first?
Yeah, I sure do. My friend, Kimball, who used to run brand relations for Jaybird. We were having lunch one day and I was talking to him about his strategy with like his business and his entrepreneur and his side hustle and his family. And he was like, you got to pay yourself first, Melissa. And I was like, wow, I'm stealing that. So I give him a lot of credit.
All right. Awesome. Well, we'll have links to his stuff
Cool.
down here too, so people can get exposed to that. Next up, what is your proudest moment to date?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. I'm like torn between talking about something with my son and talking about something professionally. I don't know, maybe the first time we made the New York Times bestseller list. Like that was just something that I never, ever imagined would ever happen, even after I wrote the book. And it took like 4 months for the first book to hit. And I just remember like seeing that in print and my mom being so excited. Like she bought like 6 copies of the New York Times, you know, just to like hand out to people. That was a really big deal for me.
That's so cool. And again, what I love is, you know, just these cycles, these unimaginable, like to achieve that level of success. And you've reached even far beyond that sense, but to achieve this sort of level of success, I think speaks volumes to everybody who's listening now and everybody who hears all your stuff about how when you get your shit together and you figure out who you really are and what you really want, I mean, the sky's not even the limit. You know, you can reach anything.
All of the reasons that I was a very good addict make me a very good entrepreneur. And like, that's what I love about it, right? Like I'm dedicated, I'm committed, I'm black or white, I'm on or off. Like all of those things that I associated as a very negative quantity when I was using or quality. Now as an entrepreneur, I'm like, yeah, this is why I can hustle like this.
Totally. Reframing. It's called reframing, right? Yeah. Exact same thing, but through a different lens.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Okay. To flip it, I think you might have already talked about this, but hardest moment to date.
I think I'm going to say the moment I decided to leave my marriage and parent my son on his own. His dad's still in the picture. He's a great dad. We have a good co-parenting relationship. But that was so difficult for me to come to the place where I realized that, like, I honestly thought that I would be better off as a single mom. And the shame that came around the idea that like my marriage failed and my child was so young. And that was probably one of the most difficult recent challenges.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That was tough.
And I'm sure if you're like any of the couples that I and Sophie do work with, that you tried a lot of other things before making that decision.
Everything. I did as much as I could to make that relationship work. I can 100% say that with confidence. It still was the hardest decision I think I've ever made. Sure.
People like us don't like quitting.
No. No.
Even drugs, right?
I
know. Okay. Next up, you already talked about this a little bit, but let's get into specifics because some people really care about this. What is your self-care ritual?
Okay. My morning routine is very, very specific. I wake up, I spend time with my son, and we're like playing puzzles or coloring. We're eating breakfast. I go to the gym or on a hike and I work for however long I want. Sometimes it's 90 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes I'm there for even longer. And then I do a post-workout meditation, which is something Todd McCullough, who we both know, taught me. And it has been like game changing in every area of my life. I mean, he's awesome. If this is the only thing he ever gives me in life, he's like one of the best people I know. So I do my post-workout meditation. I come home and I eat breakfast. Like that's my kind of morning routine. And then at night before I go to bed, and then during the day at some point, once a week, I always buy myself flowers. That's something that's a very important part of my self-care ritual. Yep. I always have fresh flowers on my table and they look really pretty. And then at night before I go to bed, I always read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's not like a workbook. It's not something that's like required reading for my job. It's just for pleasure. And that's kind of like part of my wind down routine at night.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you address the physical. What time do you wake up normally?
I'm awake every morning by about 6:30, no alarm.
Okay.
And I don't drink caffeine.
Yeah.
So I'm just like up.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm taking a caffeine break right now and everybody looks at me like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you drinking coffee? I just want to take a break. So you take care of the physical, obviously the spiritual and the emotional piece through the meditation. Is it a specific meditation or?
Yes, it's Todd McCullough's 4-part meditation. So he has guided me through it. Okay. But in the first part, you think about things you're grateful for. In the second part, you're thinking about people or someone you want to lift up. someone you sort of want to elevate. And the third part, you think about what success looks like for you today, which is where I find my mantra for the day.
Nice.
And then in the fourth part, you're present, listening to the sounds around you. And I'm doing this in the middle of a crowded, busy powerlifting, Olympic lifting gym. I am cross-legged in the middle of this gym with my headphones out, my eyes closed, just killing it.
And it's a guided meditation.
Well, I do it on my own now. He's guided me through it a few times, and now I just kind of sit and go through it on my own time.
All right. So Todd, we're sending a shout out here that apparently you've got a new product out soon that's going to come out, and it's going to be your 4-part guided meditation.
It is. I'm telling you, it's like one of the best self-care practices I've ever adopted in my whole life.
That's so great. I mean, I do gratitude in the morning too, for sure. I love that thing about who are you going to lift up. That's so cool.
It's cool.
That's really, really great. Giving back is always important. So this podcast is called Ignited. And one of the things that we like leaving everybody with is, what is it that gets you ignited? What lights your fire? What gets you going?
Hearing from people who have been impacted by the Whole30, or like something I've done or something I've said. I spend an inordinate amount of time on Instagram DMs because that is where like they feed me.
Yeah.
I hear from people who talk about not just changing their food, but like how changing their food or how coming to us through the Whole30 has impacted every area of their life. I'm hearing from people on like big issues, like big, heavy issues. They're talking to me about, you know, their rape or abuse or relationship issues or addiction and recovery. I'm hearing the small, silly, fun things that they're doing or their spouses are doing or their kids are doing. That is like what keeps me going and energized and gives me ideas to help them kind of succeed even more. Hearing from people, connecting with my people.
So awesome. I love it. And I can pretty much guarantee that after this podcast, there'll be some more converts who will just be paying attention to everything you're doing because you're awesome. I'm so happy that we met a few years ago and we did, and we get to do this now. And congratulations on all your success. It's so cool to watch.
Thank you so much. I remember that lunchtime conversation we last had at the last Revitalize. And I remember thinking like, we need to talk more. So please keep in touch. And this has been one of the best podcast conversations I think I've had.
Well, thank you so much. Same for me. Love you so much, Melissa.
Love you guys too.
Can't wait to be in touch and, just see your success and all the lives you're changing. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.